I need to see the warrant.
Open the door! We have a judge's signature! You want us to take this door off the hinges? Because we will!
You are required to show it to me first! I'm the occupant!
The heavy steel door of the converted warehouse on North 2nd Street didn't look like much. It was painted a dull industrial gray, chipped at the edges, with a small reinforced window near the top. To the casual observer, it looked like the entrance to a storage unit or maybe a struggling artist's studio. But to Officer Derek Mullins, it looked like a payday. Mullins sat in his unmarked Ford Taurus, the engine idling low to keep the air conditioning barely humming. It was 7:12 in the morning on a Saturday. The streets of Philadelphia were quiet, that strange, heavy silence that hangs over a city before the weekend rush begins. The humidity was already climbing, threatening to turn the day into a suffocating blanket of heat, but inside the car it was cool. "You sure about this intel?" Chris Santos asked from the passenger seat. Santos was 26, eager, and not particularly bright. He was the kind of cop who watched too many movies and thought police work was all about kicking doors and driving fast. He was vibrating with energy, tapping his fingers on his tactical vest. Mullins didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the gray door across the street. "I told you, didn't I?" The CI said they're moving Wade out of there on weekends. Early morning, before the neighbors wake up. "Yeah, but we haven't seen anyone go in or out since we got here," Rebecca Walsh piped up from the back seat. Walsh was smarter than Santos, but she was new to the narcotics unit. She still had some of the academy shine on her, that annoying habit of asking questions about procedure. Mullins knew he'd have to break her of that eventually. "That's because they're sleeping, Walsh," Mullins said, his voice thick with condescension. "Drug dealers don't work 9 to 5. They work when the money is there. And right now, the money is inside that building." Mullins patted the pocket of his tactical vest. Inside was a folded piece of paper that gave them permission to enter. A search warrant signed by Magistrate Judge Patricia Morrison at 4:55 p.m. the previous afternoon. It was a masterpiece of creative writing. In the affidavit, Mullins had sworn that a confidential informant with a history of reliability had observed large quantities of narcotics inside the warehouse. He had described high-volume foot traffic consistent with drug sales. He had claimed that the building was a single-use commercial property with no residential tenants. None of it was true. The confidential informant was a junkie named T-Bone who Mullins hadn't seen in 6 months. The foot traffic was actually just people walking to the coffee shop on the corner. And the building wasn't commercial. It was residential. But Mullins didn't care about the details. He cared about the seizure. If they found cash inside, and drug dealers always had cash, the department got to keep a chunk of it. And if they found drugs, well, nobody was going to cry about a little exaggeration on the paperwork. "All right," Mullins said, checking his watch. 7:15, let's do it. He killed the engine. The three of them stepped out of the car, adjusting their vests. Mullins pulled his badge out from under his shirt so it hung visibly against his chest. Santos grabbed the battering ram from the trunk, just in case. Walsh checked her service weapon. They crossed the street in a loose formation. Mullins took the lead. He felt that familiar surge of adrenaline, the rush of power that came with knowing he was about to ruin someone's day. He walked up the concrete steps to the gray door. He didn't look for a doorbell. He didn't look for a mailbox. He just raised his heavy fist and pounded on the metal. Bang, bang, bang. "Police. Search warrant. Open up." His voice echoed off the brick buildings across the street. Inside the warehouse, Jasmine Carter was standing in her kitchen, pouring boiling water over coffee grounds. She froze. Jasmine was 29 years old, but she had the eyes of someone who had seen too much of the world's ugliness. She was wearing a pair of oversized sweatpants and a vintage Stanford University t-shirt. Her hair was wrapped in a silk scarf, and she was barefoot. She didn't look like a threat. She didn't look like power. She put the kettle down slowly. She didn't panic. She didn't run to flush anything down the toilet. She simply walked to the small monitor on her kitchen counter that showed the feed from the camera mounted above her door. She saw 3 figures. Tactical vests. Guns. one of them holding a battering ram. Jasmine's heart rate didn't spike. Instead, her mind shifted gears. It went from Saturday morning relaxation to Federal Prosecutor mode. She recognized the lead officer instantly, not by name, but by type. She had cross-examined 100 men just like him. Aggressive. Sloppy. Arrogant. She walked to the door. She checked the heavy security chain to make sure it was engaged. Then she unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door 3 inches. The humid morning air rushed in, smelling of asphalt and exhaust. "We have a warrant to search this property," Mullins shouted before the door even stopped moving. "Step aside." Mullins moved to push the door open, but the chain caught it with a sharp metallic clack. He stopped, surprised. He tried to peer through the gap. He saw a young black woman looking back at him with an expression that could freeze water. "Show me the warrant," Jasmine said. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't screechy. It was flat, calm, and utterly commanding. Mullins blinked. He was used to screaming. He was used to crying. He was used to people begging him not to come in. He wasn't used to orders. "I said open the door," Mullins yelled, leaning in so his face was inches from the crack. "We have a judge's signature. You want us to take this door off the hinges? Because we will." "Officer," Jasmine said, and she actually took a sip from the mug of coffee she was still holding. "I am going to speak very clearly so you can understand me. Under the 4th Amendment of the United States Constitution, and specifically under Pennsylvania Rule of Criminal Procedure 205, you are required to present the warrant and the affidavit of probable cause to the occupant before you enter the premises. I am the occupant. You are outside. Show me the warrant." Mullins turned red. He looked back at Santos, who was hefting the ram, looking confused. "Lady, you are interfering with a police investigation," Mullins spat. "That is obstruction of justice. That is a crime. I will drag you out of here in cuffs if you don't undo that chain right now." Jasmine didn't flinch. And conducting a warrantless search is a violation of 18 U.S. Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. That is a federal felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison. So we have a choice. You can show me the paper that says you're allowed to be here, or you can commit a felony on camera. She pointed a slender finger up at the camera lens above the door. Mullins hesitated. He hated cameras. He hated lawyers. And he was starting to get a very bad feeling about this woman. She used the code numbers. Civilians didn't know the code numbers. "Who do you think you are?" Mullins sneered. "I don't think," Jasmine said. "I know. My name is Jasmine Carter. I am an assistant United States attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. I work in the Public Corruption Unit. My entire job consists of putting corrupt police officers in federal prison. Now, for the last time, slide the warrant under the door." The silence that followed was absolute. Santos lowered the battering ram. Walsh took a half step back. Mullins felt the sweat break out on his forehead, cold and clammy. Assistant United States Attorney. It was the one title that scared cops more than Internal Affairs. Internal Affairs could fire you. A federal prosecutor could bury you. Mullins looked at the door. He looked at the flimsy piece of paper in his pocket. He knew it was garbage. He knew it was full of lies. But if he backed down now, he looked weak. If he left, she would report him anyway. He had to brazen it out. He had to hope that maybe, just maybe, the warrant would hold up enough to cover his ass. "Fine," Mullins said, his voice losing its edge. "You want to play lawyer? Here." He folded the warrant and shoved it through the gap between the door and the frame. Jasmine set her coffee down on the small table by the entrance. She picked up the paper. Mullins watched her through the crack. He watched her eyes move. She didn't skim. She read. She scrutinized. She was reading it like she was grading a paper. Inside Jasmine's mind, the analysis was running at light speed. Warrant No 2024 a 9,982. Issued October 14th. Judge P. Morrison. Target premises: the warehouse structure at 442 North 2nd Street. Affiant. Detective Derek Mullins. She paused at the description of the property. Officer, Jasmine said without looking up. This warrant authorizes a search of the warehouse structure. It describes the property as a single-unit commercial storage facility. So, Mullins grunted. So, Jasmine said, looking him dead in the eye through the crack. This building was converted into 2 residential condos 3 years ago. There is Unit A, which is the ground floor, and Unit B, which is my home. There are 2 mailboxes clearly visible on the exterior wall. There are 2 electric meters. There are 2 gas meters. Did you miss all of that during your surveillance? Mullins swallowed. It looked like one building from the street. Lie number 1, Jasmine noted, her voice icy. She went back to reading. Probable cause. Confidential informant 459 has provided reliable information in 12 prior narcotics arrests. Jasmine let out a short, sharp laugh.
C459?
Really? You're using 459 again. Mullins froze. You don't know my sea ice. Actually, I do, Jasmine said. I prosecuted the Commonwealth versus Henderson case last year. Officer Henderson from your unit listed CI 459 as his source. But under cross-examination, he admitted that CI 459 was a composite of neighborhood rumors and didn't actually exist. Are you telling me you're using a ghost informant to get into a federal prosecutor's house? That's a different CI, Mullins stammered. Different number. Lie number 2, Jasmine said. She flipped to the back page. Officer claims to have observed high-volume foot traffic consistent with retail narcotic sales between the hours of 12 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. on Friday, October 13th. Jasmine looked up. She undid the chain. Mullins straightened up, thinking she was finally surrendering. Jasmine opened the door wide. She stepped out onto the stoop. She towered over Mullins, not physically, but in presence. She held the warrant up in the sunlight. I was home all night on Friday, October 13th, Jasmine said. I was preparing for a trial. I have a Ring doorbell camera that records 24/7. I reviewed the footage this morning because I heard a noise. Do you know how many people came to this door between midnight and 4 a.m.? Mullins didn't answer. He couldn't. 0, Jasmine whispered. Not one. Not a single soul. Which means, Officer Mullins, that you committed perjury on a sworn affidavit. You lied to a judge. You fabricated evidence. And you tried to use those lies to violate the sanctity of my home. She stepped closer. Mullins actually took a step back. You have 3 seconds to get off my property, Jasmine said. If you are still standing here in 4 seconds, I will consider you to be trespassing. I will call the FBI. I will call the U.S. Marshal Service. And I will have you arrested right here on the sidewalk in front of your partners. We have a warrant, Mullins tried, but his voice was a whisper. You have a piece of paper covered in felonies, Jasmine corrected him, and I'm keeping it as evidence. She folded the warrant and put it in the pocket of her sweatpants.
Go, she said.
Mullins looked at Santos. Santos looked terrified. Walsh was already walking backward toward the car. Mullins turned. He walked down the steps. His legs felt heavy. His vision was blurry. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he had just ended his own life. He got into the Taurus. He didn't say a word. He started the car and peeled away from the curb, driving fast, not because he had somewhere to go, but because he needed to get away from the woman in the Stanford shirt. Jasmine watched them leave. She stood on her stoop until the car turned the corner. Then she turned around, went back inside, and locked the door.
She didn't sit down.
She didn't finish her coffee. She walked to her home office, sat down at her desk, and picked up her phone. She dialed a number from memory. Special Agent Miller? This is Jasmine Carter. I need you to open a case file immediately. Subject is Detective Derek Mullins, Philadelphia PD Narcotics. Charge is deprivation of rights, perjury, and wire fraud. And Miller, bring a team. We're going to need a lot of handcuffs. By 8 a.m., the Philadelphia field office of the FBI was buzzing. Saturday mornings were usually quiet, skeleton crews manning the phones, agents catching up on paperwork. But not today. Special Agent David Miller hung up the phone with Jasmine Carter and immediately walked into the Assistant Special Agent in charge's office. "Boss, we have a problem," Miller said. Philly PD Narcotics just tried to raid Jasmine Carter's house. The ASAC, a grizzled veteran named Tom Reynolds, looked up from his coffee. "Jasmine Carter? Our Jasmine Carter?" "The AUSA. The very same," Miller said. "She says they had a warrant based on a non-existent CI and surveillance that never happened. She has the warrant. She has the doorbell footage proving the surveillance is a lie. She wants heads to roll, Tom. And she wants them now." Reynolds stood up. "Get the public corruption squad in here. Call the U.S. attorney. And get me the police commissioner on the line. I want that officer's badge on my desk before lunch." Across town, Derek Mullins was sitting in his car in a parking lot 3 blocks from the precinct. He couldn't bring himself to go in. He was hyperventilating. "What do we do, Derek?" Santos asked from the passenger seat. "She said she's a federal." "Is she really a Fed?" "She's a Fed," Mullins whispered. He had Googled her on his phone while they sat there. There she was. Jasmine Carter. Top prosecutor. Award winner. The face of the Justice Department's anti-corruption crusade. "We stick to the story," Mullins said, trying to convince himself. "We say the CI gave us bad intel. We say we acted in good faith. Judges make mistakes. Informants lie. It happens. They can't fire us for a bad tip." "She said perjury, Derek," Walsh said from the back. "She said she has camera footage proving you lied about the surveillance. You told me you saw the foot traffic yourself. You wrote in the report, Affiant observed. That's you. That's not the CI. That's you lying." Mullins spun around. "Shut up, Walsh. We are a team. We stick together. If I go down, we all go down." "No," Walsh said, opening her door. "I didn't sign that affidavit. You did. I'm not going to prison for you." Walsh got out of the car and started walking toward the precinct. Mullins watched her go. He knew it was over. By Monday morning, the storm had made landfall. Jasmine Carter walked into the federal courthouse at 8:30 a.m. She looked impeccable in a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back tight. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a predator. She walked straight to the chief judge's chambers. She had an emergency meeting scheduled with Judge Patricia Morrison, the magistrate who had signed the warrant. When Jasmine laid the warrant on the judge's mahogany desk, Judge Morrison turned pale. "He told me it was a warehouse," Morrison said, her hand trembling as she touched the paper. "He swore under oath it was abandoned commercial property." "Jasmine, I swear to you, if I had known you lived there—" "I know, Patty," Jasmine said softly. "He lied to you. He used your court to facilitate a crime. That's why I need you to unseal every warrant application Derek Mullins has submitted to your court in the last 2 years. All of them." "You have them," Morrison said. "I'll sign the order right now." While Jasmine was gathering evidence, the FBI was executing a search warrant of their own. But this time, they were searching the narcotics unit's office. 12 agents in FBI windbreakers marched into the precinct. The desk sergeant tried to stop them. "You can't go back there," he shouted. "Federal warrant," Agent Miller said, holding up the paper. "Step aside or you're obstructing." They went straight to Mullins' desk. They seized his computer. They seized his logbooks. They seized his phone. Then they went to the evidence locker. What they found in the files was a roadmap of corruption. They found confidential informant payment vouchers for thousands of dollars paid to people who were dead or incarcerated at the time of the payment. They found identical paragraphs of probable cause copy-pasted into 40 different warrant applications. They found text messages between Mullins and Santos joking about taxing drug dealers, stealing money during raids, and not reporting it. It wasn't just a bad warrant. It was a criminal enterprise operating with badges and guns. On Wednesday, Derek Mullins was arrested. He was at his house, in his boxers, watching the news, waiting for the inevitable. When the pounding came at his door, he didn't ask to see a warrant. He knew they had one. He opened the door to find Agent Miller and a SWAT team. "Derek Mullins," Miller said. You are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, deprivation of rights under color of law, wire fraud, and perjury. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Mullins turned around. He felt the cold steel of the handcuffs. It felt different when they were on him. It felt tighter. He was walked out of his house past his neighbors, past the news cameras that were already set up on his lawn. Jasmine watched the arrest from her office window. She didn't feel joy. She felt a grim satisfaction. But she knew the fight wasn't over. An arrest was easy. A conviction was hard. "He's going to claim good faith," David Ross, the prosecutor assigned to the case, told her later that day. "He's going to say he was sloppy, not criminal. He's going to say he relied on bad intel. We need to prove intent." "I'll give you intent," Jasmine said. She slid a file across the desk. "This is a list of the 27 other warrants he executed in the last 18 months. Look at the addresses." Ross looked. "They're all in minority neighborhoods. Low income." "Exactly," Jasmine said. "He targets people he thinks can't fight back. People who can't afford lawyers. People who won't know to ask for the warrant. He thought I was one of them. That's his intent. He predates on the vulnerable. Prove that pattern, and you bury him." The trial was set for 6 months later. The defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer paid for by the police union, went on the offensive immediately. He went on TV and called Jasmine anti-police. He called her a radical activist who was trying to neuter law enforcement. He tried to paint Mullins as a hero cop doing a dangerous job who made an honest mistake. It was a narrative that worked with some people. Jasmine received hate mail. She received death threats. Someone threw a brick through the window of her warehouse apartment. She didn't move. She didn't hide. She kept the brick on her desk as a paperweight. "Let them talk," Jasmine told her team. "We have the truth. And we have the receipts." The trial began on a rainy Tuesday in November. The courtroom was packed. The tension was thick enough to choke on. David Ross gave the opening statement. He didn't scream. He didn't pace. He just told the story. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Ross said, "the Fourth Amendment is just words on a piece of paper. It cannot protect you. It cannot stop a bullet. It cannot lock a door. The only thing that gives those words power is the integrity of the men and women sworn to uphold them. And when a police officer lies to a judge to bypass those rights, he is not just breaking a rule. He is breaking the very foundation of our freedom." Derek Mullins didn't just knock on the wrong door. He knocked on the door of justice. And justice answered. Jasmine took the stand on the third day. She walked to the witness box with her head high. She swore to tell the truth. The defense attorney, a slick man named Mr. Sterling, tried to rattle her. "Miss Carter," Sterling said, pacing in front of her. "You're a prosecutor. You know how dangerous drug raids are. Isn't it true that you were hostile to Officer Mullins from the moment he arrived?" "I was not hostile," Jasmine said calmly. "I was constitutional." "You refused to open the door," Sterling pressed. "I refused to waive my rights," Jasmine corrected him. "You threatened him with federal prison." "I informed him of the law," Jasmine said. "If he found the law threatening, that suggests a guilty conscience, not hostility on my part." "But he left," Sterling shouted. "He didn't search your house. No harm was done. Why ruin a man's life over a search that never happened?" Jasmine leaned into the microphone. She looked at the jury. "Because, Mr. Sterling," she said, "the harm wasn't in the search. The harm was in the lie. If I hadn't been a federal prosecutor, if I had been a grandmother or a student or a single mother working 2 jobs, would he have left? Or would he have kicked that door in? Would he have terrorized me? Would he have planted evidence to cover his mistake? The harm is that for 15 years, Derek Mullins has been a bully with a badge. And the only reason we are here today is because he finally tried to bully the wrong person." The jury was mesmerized. You could hear a pin drop. Sterling sat down. He knew he had lost. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the foreman stood up to read the verdict, Derek Mullins stood up too. He was shaking. His arrogance was gone. He looked small. We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Mullins, on count 1, deprivation of civil rights, guilty. On count 2, perjury, guilty. On count 3, wire fraud, guilty. Mullins closed his eyes. His wife sobbed in the gallery, but Jasmine didn't look at them. She looked at the back of the room, where a group of people were sitting. They were the other victims. The people Mullins had raided before her. The people who didn't have the power to stop him. They were crying too, but they were tears of relief. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. The federal guidelines suggested 5 to 7 years. The defense asked for probation. Judge Morrison, who had asked to speak at the sentencing, sent a letter instead. It was read into the record. Officer Mullins used my trust to weaponize the judicial system. He turned the warrant process into a tool of oppression. A message must be sent that the court will not be an accomplice to tyranny. The sentencing judge, a stern man named Judge Davis, looked at Mullins. "Mr. Mullins," Judge Davis said, "you wore a uniform that represents safety. You carried a badge that represents trust. And you used them to prey on the citizens you swore to protect. You are sentenced to 96 months, 8 years. In federal prison. Remand is immediate." The marshals moved in. They told Mullins to turn around. He put his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked. It was the same sound Jasmine had heard 1,000 times in her career. But this time, it sounded different. It sounded like closure. As Mullins was led away, he looked back at Jasmine. She met his gaze. She didn't look away. After the trial, the fallout continued. The Philadelphia Police Department entered into a consent decree with the Department of Justice. They agreed to a massive overhaul of their warrant procedures. Every warrant application now had to be reviewed by a legal counsel before being submitted to a judge. The knock and talk unit was disbanded. Rebecca Walsh, the rookie officer who had walked away, testified against Mullins in exchange for immunity. She left the force and became a social worker. Chris Santos was fired and charged with lesser crimes. He pled guilty and received probation. Jasmine Carter became a legend in the legal community. But she didn't move to a big firm. She didn't run for office. She stayed in the public corruption unit. 3 years later, Jasmine was walking home to her warehouse apartment. It was a Saturday morning, much like the one that had started it all. She saw a police cruiser parked across the street. A young officer was standing there, looking at a building. Jasmine stopped. She watched him. The officer saw her. He recognized her. Every cop in the city recognized her now. He nodded respectfully. "Morning, Miss Carter." "Morning, officer," Jasmine said. "Everything okay?" "Just checking a report of a noise complaint," the officer said. "We knocked." No answer. "We're clearing out."
No warrant.
Jasmine asked, a slight smile on her lips. "No warrant, ma'am," the officer said quickly. "We follow the rules." "Good," Jasmine said. "Keep it that way." She walked up her steps and unlocked her gray steel door. She went inside, locked the deadbolt, and put the kettle on for coffee. She felt safe. Not because she had a gun. Not because she had a badge. But because she had proven that even the most powerful people in the city were not above the law. She sat down at her desk. On the corner, sitting on top of a stack of files, was a framed piece of paper. It was the original warrant that Derek Mullins had slid under her door. She kept it there as a reminder. A reminder that freedom is fragile. A reminder that rights are only words until someone stands up and demands them. And a reminder that the most dangerous thing a corrupt cop can ever do is underestimate the woman standing on the other side of the door. What would you do if the police knocked on your door with a fake warrant? Let me know your thoughts on the comment section. Thanks for watching. Do remember to hit the subscribe button, like and share this story, and I'll see you in the next one.